In this position in 1988, former world champion Mikhail took his opponent into the forest, and there was no way back. Let's see what happens here. So in the game, his opponent just played king to h8 to sidestep this open g-file. So Tal decides to continue with rook h to f1, now preparing pawn to f6, which would trap this bishop. So the opponent decides to just play bishop takes d4, eliminating the knight. But usually you don't want to give up this dark squared bishop because it's controlling all the weak dark squares around the king. But black had a very concrete point. After rook takes d4, their idea was pawn to e5, attacking the rook. And after the rook moves, black can now force a queen trade to go into an endgame. But the problem for Tal's opponent is that Tal was never actually interested in saving this rook. He immediately strikes with queen to h6, taking advantage of these vulnerable dark squares. And now if you take this rook with the pawn, Tal would simply play queen to f6 check, king to g8, and pawn to h6, and there'd be no defense against queen to g7 checkmate. But after queen to h6, you can simply take this rook with the queen, and now the queen can defend checkmate with queen to g4. But now Tal plays queen to f6 check and king to g8, and we're left in this position where Tal is down a full rook. And when the engine evaluates this position, initially it thinks it should be a draw by some sort of repetition of moves. But after you let the engine think for about 5 minutes, it realizes Tal is completely winning. So if the computer is confused in this position, imagine being the opponent. Here, Tal strikes with knight to d5. Now sacrificing his knight and immediately threatening knight to e7, which is checkmate. And if you simply take this knight, then Tal's idea was queen to g5 check, king to g8, and simply pawn to h6, threatening checkmate, and after rook to g8, queen to f6, and queen to g7 is checkmate. So after knight to d5, Tal is threatening checkmate, and you cannot accept this knight. So the opponent plays the very logical rook to e8, now defending against checkmate. But here Tal plays queen to g5 check, king to h8, and now pawn to h6, threatening checkmate. And black thinks they're very clever with pawn to e4, now opening up the queen's defense towards checkmate. And Tal shuts it down again with pawn to f6. And here his opponent plays rook to g8. And after rook to g8, we stop the checkmate threat on g7, and Tal is just down a rook, and it looks like the attack is over. And the attack does look over, but there's one winning move here. Tal stuns his opponent with queen to g7 check, sacrificing the queen, forcing the rook to take, because after the h-pawn takes and king to g8, this pawn is now dominating the dark squares, and we have knight to e7. Checkmate.